Welcome to Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join into this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, then please do me the big favour, hitting that thumbs up button at some point during this episode, subscribing if you enjoy this kind of content. There are over 300 videos on the channel, so please make sure you check out some more once you've watched this one if you've enjoyed it. And if you've absolutely loved this education, then please head over to my academy, linked in the description, where you can become an academy member. Lots of exclusive content each and every month to help you improve your hairdressing skills and level up as a hairdresser. Enjoy today's episode.
Style. Hi, beautiful. Today we're doing some balayage formula. The more thick it is, the less it glides in the hair, but you also don't want it to be runny and thin because that will create bleeding and it'll be a mess for you. You know, some people use scales for this. Some people eyeball it. I'm one of those people that eyeball it. A good mixing ratio would be 2 parts powder to 1 part developer. And
as you probably know, I am a big fan of using scales always. 2-to-1 ratio also creates a reasonably thin consistency when you're balayaging, so that's probably the first thing I'd say here is just make sure that you use a very precise mixing ratio, especially with balayage, because if you need to mix more and you've eyeballed it and you mix it at a lower ratio or you put more powder in, if you put more powder in, it makes it more powerful and therefore you might get different lift to what you've been doing previously. You might want to start on a lower ratio, you might want to start on a lower peroxide. The ratio of which you mix your bleach powder to your peroxide does affect the performance of the bleach. So yes, eyeball away, but know why that might not be such a good idea. I mean, look, Brad can do whatever he wants. Brad Mondo. Let's, leave it there. But at the end of the day, is Brad making his living from doing this day in, day out? He's absolutely not. So saying some of these things isn't always conducive to a good outcome. And I just wanted to really point that out.
and then we are just doing 4 quadrants, guys.
Totally with Brad there. 4 quadrants is the easiest way to get this job done. I always use 4 quadrants. Highest part of the head down to the back of the ear. Split the head from the front to the back. 4 quadrants, easy peasy. I'm right with him here. At this point, we're together. Me and Brad are synchronized in his way of going about sectioning his balayage.
Is going to make it so that the highlights are very blended. When you do diagonals, you're getting blending. When all this hair is straight down over this.
That is true. Diagonal lines do create softness. They draw the eye away from the highest point down to the lowest point in whichever direction you go in. I've tried backwards, I've tried forwards. So forwards is towards the face. I don't think there is any specific benefit to going in any particular direction. And what Brad's done there, diagonal backwards, is exactly what I do 98% of the time.
So you want to make sure that there's no tangles in the hair because you would hate to highlight a tangle into the hair.
Not exactly sure what he means by highlight a tangle into the hair, but yes, he's absolutely right. You do want to make sure there's no knots or anything to impede the brush strokes as you go, but I don't think a knot's going to make a big difference, just so you know. If you went over a knot, it'd have to be a behemoth knot for it to have any impact on how this would turn out.
And I like to start kind of at the middle and work my way up, okay? We're not pushing down on the hair. That will give you weird blotchiness going on. We don't want that. And I like to bring up a couple of bright highlights going on, and then I like to really blend the center. If you need to wipe some excess of the bleach onto the back of your hand, you can totally do that as well. Now you can blend up, and I like to go up and down and not just go downwards, but try and focus on the downwards motion as much as possible. Sometimes you can create a little bit of like frizz at the scalp if you start going up and down like very vigorously. But yeah, that is what it should look like.
One thing I will say is that the amount of lightener that Brad has got onto the hair, where he says that's it, is done, is not going to give you a lot of lift. If you are struggling to get lift from your balayages, you do need to apply a lot more lightener than that. You do not want to be able to see the hair that you want to lift. You want to completely cover it. So that would be fine for me, say like on layer number 1, but I would now go back in, apply more product and stick a second layer over the top of that to create a nice thick coverage in the hair. That way we get maximum lift out of our balayage. And I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is getting the hair to lift more than 2 or 3 shades.
I like to look underneath and kind of just like do a little blend. Your last stroke, you're gonna wanna make sure there's a nice amount of lightener on those ends before you let it go.
It did go in, back, it did the blending on the underneath. Really important, because if the hair's ever worn up, and if you leave any horizontal lines like that, especially on the hairline, then it will be noticeable, and that will be a problem because the client will see it when their hair's tied up, or their friend will see it even worse and say, do you know? Yeah, you don't want that. However, as I said previously, quantity of light that you get on the hair is absolutely paramount to getting the hair light enough. There is not enough lightener on the hair, especially above the point of which you went for that full saturation end. He's got more lightener on that full saturation end, but above that, he's only going to get minimal lift. If you did this on a real client and you had that very, very sparse saturation higher up the head here, and then that very, very thick saturation towards the ends, you would have much, much brighter ends, and then a kind of invisible, it might look like more like an ombre. He did say that he was going to darken it down with a toner, or you could darken it down with a toner, and that is completely true, but I know that lots of people struggle to get the lift with their balayage techniques, and that amount of saturation is one of the main reasons why people struggle with their balayage technique. I would probably now apply a whole nother layer of lightener onto the hair to make sure that I couldn't see any of the hair. I wanted to be light. Yes, you can leave out pieces, paint the edges, put one in the middle, whatever you want to do, but make sure that there is plenty of product applied to that hair.
Section down, it was super simple. If it's kind of leaning like this off to one side, you did it right. Your tension was good, so congrats. And if you didn't, try harder next time, okay?
That's not entirely true, actually. If it's leaning to one side like that, that meant the hair was painted out of natural fall. So when he was holding the section, pulling it one way or the other. In this particular instance, Brad was pulling their hair to the right, hence why it's falling to the right. If the hair was coming straight out from the head, where the hair grew out from the head, it would then just fall back into the position it was previously.
Play lightener, you can buy lightener that does have a protective surrounding on it when it dries. However, when I do this, I just like to lay the hair very gently on top sometimes and do that moment and not worry about it bleeding, because it really shouldn't if you've done it correctly. And obviously just make sure the person doesn't like sit back on it or do anything crazy, but I just don't even use plastic anymore. It's not worth it.
So he's absolutely right. You don't need to cover it. I don't cover all of my balayage techniques, especially if I don't want lots of lift. But if you do want lots of lift, if you cover it, you'll prevent it from drying out. You'll prevent your bleach from drying out, which means that it will lift for longer and give you more levels of lift. I know when I go and teach in people's salons and in classes, and when I used to teach balayage class, that what people would struggle with is getting more than 2 to 3 levels of lift. If you want more than 2 to 3 levels of lift and you haven't got like maximum saturation, then you do need to kind of consider covering that hair.
You can also use foils. That way, if the person's hair is really dark to start and you want a very light result, you can get it all in one day. Using foils will make the lightener develop faster. It'll make it develop lighter.
You said using foil will make it lighten faster. Myth. It will not go faster. It will prevent it from drying out. The same way the cling film coverings prevent it from drying out. Nothing will speed it up apart from adding heat. But do not add heat, because it does damage the hair further. So just allow it to process within the manufacturer's guidelines.
So typically here, I will just go like this with the hair and push it back up to the scalp and see where the hair naturally parts. Now, usually people have some interesting calyx going back here, and sometimes it'll be parted like that naturally. So I'll put a highlight going this way and then one going this way. That way, when their hair naturally parts into that calyx formation, it's gonna have highlights on both sides. Now, Miss Maniquin's hair lays just down flat, so I'm gonna be doing just some horizontal sections going like.
Really good tip to kind of manage really strong partings in that particular crown area. And I work up the hair diagonally like that and end up with a V shape just like that on 98% of my techniques. Unless the crown is particularly strong, or there's two, I just tend to ignore the crown area and just use that V-shaped section, pull it down as Brad's about to, and then paint my shape in whichever I'm going to use, either a V-shape or a W shape, to create the different points of light in the hair.
That way she gets really impactful highlights right on the top of her hair and it looks really bright and beautiful. I'm going to skip one section before I start, just because we just did this section below that, making sure it's not laying on the other hair. And then I'm going to just cut across and do these two sections. that's looking really good. I'm just gonna add full saturation at the bottom, and this piece will be good to go. And for this next section, I am not gonna be skipping any hair. I'm just gonna be doing the next section right over the previous.
Brad's saturation increased and improved throughout the whole technique. It was like he was listening on that first section. You can see if we take a close-up look at how much saturation he's got on those edges and how much he's got in the middle there. That middle's not going to take as well. He's going to get more lift on those edges, which is going to define that V shape, which is really beautiful. And then he's got that really, really nice... he probably could get a little bit more light. Like he actually said it himself, like it was frosted or iced, like you would a cake. You don't want to see any cake when you put icing on it. And so in this particular instance, if we look closely, you can see a little bit of the hair through it. So therefore, you could definitely get more lighter on there. And it would be very simple. You just go over what Brad had already done, or Brad put more colour onto what he'd already done. He'd get even more lift out of it. It looks very nice, so good job.
An important thing to note is if you like put a clump of color on the hair like that in one spot, you don't want that. You want a really smooth finish. That way you don't get any light spots and dark spots.
Brad's absolutely right. If you do get a lot of lightener in one spot and around it there's not as much lightener, you do get more lift. And this is what I've been saying all the way through about controlling the saturation, making sure it's even and it looks like it's been iced. That's actually what people end up doing a lot of the time, is that they leave a big piece of lightener in their blend, for example, or on the edge of their point of light, or something like that, where they're trying to sort of concentrate on the whole thing at once. When you're painting, really just focus on that bit that you're painting, making sure that you're getting maximum coverage, then move on. Especially when you're doing your points of light. The points of light are obviously going to be really important to, you know, creating the look of a balayage that has dimension in it. That's the other thing about what Brad was just saying there, where there's like a blob of lightener and that will create more lift and it wants to look even. Yes, it does want to look even. It wants to look like you've got the same amount of lightener on the ends as it does on your points of light, even if that makes your points of light look very, very streaky. Remember, you're only painting the surface of the hair, and that is only going to be, you know, 15, 16 hairs thick, which is very fine highlight effectively. So it can be chunky and it won't look chunky. And that's one of the things that I see a lot. People lose their points of light, the lightest points highest up the head. These are the points of light right here, right here. People lose those because they don't get enough product on those pieces comparative to what they did on the ends.
We're gonna lift this out 90 degrees from her head, and we are gonna paint this entire section right up to the root. All right, we don't have to do a ton of blending, just getting it right up there. It's also good to do this last because this is so fragile, this hair up here, and it usually develops the fastest.
Brad's absolutely right. Don't break your back. Move your clients around. They've only got to sit there for an hour while you do this, or even less, depending on how fast you are. You have to spend the rest of your life doing it. That is absolutely true. Good advice, Brad.
I'm gonna paint the back of that piece and then bring everything else basically down to the scalp.
I like that tip there of taking that hairline out, utilizing that vertical slice section around the front hairline, giving you a beautiful money piece if that's what you want. I'm really intrigued to see how this all lifts.
All right, so we just finished this side. This is what it looks like. It looks fabulous. It's developing really nicely. The back is nearly ready to be rinsed out. So what I like to do is rinse by section. So the back we did.
Rinsing a balayage by section. So the quadrant that you started on first, and then the second quadrant, and then the third, and then the fourth, is nearly impossible, because by the time you've held the hair out of the way, or you've got someone to hold the hair out of the way, or put a clip in it, you've ruined what you've done. You've pushed the product through to sections where you didn't want lightener. So I don't know why you would recommend that ever on a balayage. Yes, on a set of highlights. Yes, on a technique like a scalp bleach, for example's sake, where the lightener is just covered the hair and it makes no difference. You can hold onto the hair as hard as you like, and it doesn't matter if the lightener comes off or gets pressed on. But on a balayage, no. Just either use a weaker lightener in the back and a stronger lightener in the front, or make sure that you're just very fast and it will all sort of process evenly. There is absolutely no way of getting that off in that way. Well, listen, if he shows us how to do it, then great, but I don't think that's a thing.
You can time it however you want. 35 to 45 minutes is enough time for your balayage to process. It's all based on the hair type, the hair texture, everything going on with that person's hair. So just check it and make your best judgment on when it is done being processed.
To be honest, you know, giving advice like how long you should leave something on for is incredibly difficult. people ask me questions like that. What products did you use in the comment section? What developer did you use in the comment section? It's very difficult for me to give you good advice, so I very rarely respond to those comments. And I know it's what you want to know, but it's impossible to give that advice because each situation is very, very different. Your hair might be damaged or it might not be damaged. And that would then depend on how long we left it on, what strength of product we used, etc., etc. So to just blanket give you a processing time is very difficult. All manufacturers have a maximum development time of like up to 45, 50 minutes, 55 minutes in some cases, but they don't recommend leaving it on any longer because you can jeopardize the condition. Because the longer you leave the hair in an alkaline state, the more damage you do.
All right, you guys, so this is the finished look. Oh my God, she looks incredible. I wish this was my hair. Her hair looks completely different.
So, toned it with 8GN, which is Redken Shades EQ, which I'm very, very familiar with. And as you can see, there is a difference before and after. The before picture is a bit darker. He didn't get tons of lift, like I said. It was never going to get tons of lift because of the amount of saturation, and it's a mannequin head. So there was two factors at play. Now you probably would have got another shade of lift. And when you tone something down, you are in the low contrast zone. So I'll explain what that is. Okay, so we have got ourselves a shade chart, and we've got black here and blonde there. So Brad started with the mannequin head on a level 6. That's a level 6 there. This one. So he then lifted it to a level 8, which is this one. 2 shades of contrast where you've gone 2 shades lighter is very subtle. It doesn't make a huge difference whether you did the best balayage in the goddamn world when you do 2 shades of contrast, because it will blend in to the hair and it will be much more subtle. If you'd have gone for 3 shades of contrast, should he have lifted up to a level 9 or even higher, 4 levels onto a level 10, then his balayage would show up maybe more mistakes, more indiscrepancies, more of those points where he didn't saturate enough in some areas and it was stronger in others. He might need to do a little root shadow to diffuse the points of which his points of light stopped. Because he didn't lift it like that, it's hard to say. But what I will say is that if he wanted those levels of lift from that 6 up to a 9 or a 10, he would have definitely needed more saturation. But here's the thing, guys. If you are colouring hair and you go from a level 6 or up to a level 8, or if you go from a level 4 up to a level 6, the technique doesn't need to be absolutely... You can make it perfect, of course, because you're hairdressers, and I know what hairdressers are like. They're perfectionists. But if you are only doing 2 shades of contrast, you do not need to make a big deal about perfect application. I mean, really big mistakes will show up, of course, but I'm talking in the realms of reality. So hopefully that will help you understand 2 shades of contrast is very, very difficult to kind of see any mistakes at that point.
I hope you guys can take some of those techniques and use them on yourself or on your clients to get beautiful, gorgeous, fabulous balayage. If you guys aren't already subscribed...
Nice work, Brad. Liked it. You did a good job. Well done. I actually like watching Brad do hair because obviously a lot of people out there don't think he's a hairdresser or don't think he's a good hairdresser or whatever they think about him. And obviously we've seen other video. I made a video where he did this bleach job and he could have probably tackled it in a different way. But then I've seen him do some transformation stuff where he's really gone about it in the right way, but he's still improving his techniques and stuff. I like Brad. Whatever you say about him, good, bad or indifferent, I like him. I think he's brilliant at what he does. He's got a phenomenal YouTube channel. He is wildly successful. 10 out of 10, Brad, for what you've done. And actually, I think over the years, Brad's hairdressing's improved. And you can only say that is a good thing, because at this point in time, this boy's earning big money and he doesn't need to improve his hairdressing skills. He has earned all of his money with his mouth. And the way he looks, he's a good looking guy too. Smashed it. Nice job.